Myanmar now, where it's been 5 days since that catastrophic cyclone hit. The official death toll stands at just under 23,000, but a U.S. official says it's more likely to be 100,000. More than 1 million people are homeless, but help is just not arriving on time. The UN has the power to go in, yet so far just 2 of its 8 flights have landed. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon told reporters a short while ago that he's requested for talks with Myanmar's General Tun Shwe to push for more cooperation in the relief efforts. Well, Aljazeera has 2 correspondents in the Irrawaddy Delta who've managed to reach the worst-hit areas. Our first report is from a remote village where our correspondent has been hearing the survivors' stories.
A fishing village near the Irrawaddy Delta. Villagers here have buried 2,000 bodies in the past few days in every available dry patch of land, often 2 to 3 in the same grave. The survivors of Cyclone Nergus are hungry and homeless. This man had a house before. Now he and his family of 5 have nowhere to go.
We've been reduced to eating broth.
Everywhere we went, people looked helpless and desperate. Government food aid has arrived, but people say it's not enough to survive. This woman insisted that we follow her to her house. 18 of her relatives, brothers, sisters, nephews and nieces were swept away by the cyclone. The family is distraught, and her mother is beside herself with grief, but she wanted her story to be told.
It became windy at 9 o'clock at night, and at 11, water flooded and people started running. They were clinging onto the trees. In the early morning, around 3 or 4, people started to drown.
She survived by holding on to a pole, her neck just out of the water. And despite their own tragedies, the villagers have come to console her. But everyone in the village have their own story to tell.
The government gave 4 glasses of rice and a small fish to each family. It's just not enough. If we don't get any assistance, we'll die here. Already most people have started to get diarrhea.
They have not had clean drinking water since Friday, and there is little shelter from the rain. 1 million traumatized people in southern Myanmar are enduring conditions like this, and time is running out. Aljazeera in the Irrawaddy Delta, Myanmar.
Well, a woman who said the death toll could rise to more than 100,000 is the top U.S. diplomat in Myanmar. Shari Valrosa has been speaking to Aljazeera in Yangon.
What is frustrating to me is to realize that there are millions of suffering people out there whose situation is only going to get worse. And there's assistance out there. It's ready to come in. It can quickly be distributed. And the longer we have to wait, the more victims we will have. The figures could reach 100,000, which, again, yesterday the figures were between both dead and missing were 60,000, but climbing. In the remote areas of the Delta, people haven't reached, and I'm sure they're going to find more deaths there, because it was just this huge wave that came over people while they were sleeping at night and took them away. I live here, I see the conditions, I see beginning of some recovery, but the scenes that you see of the Delta with this water all over every place, not only human bodies but animal bodies, and and what about there are a few survivors, and they're sitting there and they don't have any food, they don't have any drinking water, because this big storm surge contaminated all their fresh water supplies. So they're sitting out there isolated, like on little tiny islands, and nobody's getting to them.
Well, aid worth more than $40 million has been pledged by governments and aid organizations. Very little has arrived in Myanmar, but some is now trickling in. The United Nations says 2 of its planes have now been allowed to land in Myanmar after a 2-day delay. Shipments from Myanmar's neighbours have had better access. Planes from China, India and Bangladesh have also landed. But planes from the US, which were given the go-ahead to send aid, are still waiting to hear whether or not they'll be allowed to land. The reluctance of Myanmar's generals to cooperate with the international aid effort has brought condemnation from around the world. Nazni Mashiri has been looking at what's being done to exert international pressure.
Almost a week on, and the first consignment of aid from the United Nations finally arrives in the capital. Inside these bags, food and medical supplies. The UN and other agencies want to get more in, but Myanmar's military junta is still preventing them. The frustration is that other loaded planes can't take off, and disaster specialists can't get in.
These are professional aid workers, and they will make sure the aid gets to the people. They will organize distributions. They will identify the victims in greatest need. They will make sure the health supplies, the water, the food, the shelter supplies get to the people who need it.
International pressure on the regime is mounting. For the first time, China has urged Myanmar to cooperate with the international community. European countries like Germany want the United Nations to take action now.
It's totally incredible what's happening there. This regime is trying not to have its power questioned by not letting aid organizations into the country at the expense of their own people. This must not be allowed to happen.
Millions of dollars worth of aid has been pledged from around the world, but agencies say more must be done to get that relief in.
We need the UN to use the responsibility to protect, to force aid in, to make sure that the people don't have to go into the monsoon season, which starts in 2 weeks, without shelter, without food, without water, without healthcare.
With vast areas of the country still underwater and little or no aid reaching the survivors, fears of disease are rising every hour. Nazni Mashiri, Aljazeera.
Well, remember that this catastrophe is all about the 1 million people who are without homes and struggling to survive. In the second of our exclusive reports from inside Myanmar, our correspondent reports now on the victims still waiting for aid.
Everywhere you look across the Irrawaddy Delta, there are scenes of devastation. Village after village says they've lost everything they own, even the simple bamboo shacks they once called home. Just beyond Yangon, the largest city in Myanmar, thousands of people are stranded. They say there's been no sign of help from the government. This community is perched beside the main road. Hour after hour, they watch army vehicles pass them by.
Nobody has come to help us. The government hasn't come here. Even the local authorities have ignored us since the cyclone hit. Nobody is coming.
While the people of this village all survived, further west, the death toll keeps climbing. Tens of thousands are still missing in the places hardest hit. Cyclone Nargis has left a trail of destruction that brings back images of the 2004 tsunami. The ruling military regime has been strongly criticised by the international community for failing to alert people.
We didn't get any prior information about the cyclone. Nobody told us it was coming, and we have never experienced a big natural disaster like this before. We are very sad. Our families are in trouble, and we are going hungry.
Today, this community pools their resources, rationing their food and water in the hopes that aid will come soon. This delta region is known as the Rice Bowl of Myanmar. Last week, the farmers were preparing to harvest their rice, but now the paddy fields are underwater. And as the monsoon season approaches, the country is facing a potential food crisis. Beyond the village, 50 monks tell us they're worried they could go hungry. They occupy themselves by rebuilding their monastery. They say they can't rely on the charity and goodwill of the locals anymore for food.
We have sacks of rice, but they are running out very quickly. We can't ask for donations because everyone around here is going hungry and the people need it.
The United Nations is waiting to dispatch much-needed aid supplies. Hundreds of aid workers are waiting for permission from the ruling military junta to enter the disaster zone. The UN says this is a critical moment for Myanmar's vulnerable population, and thousands more could die if they don't get immediate help. Aljazeera, Myanmar.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but we will have more on Myanmar later in the programme. We'll hear from the people